again. Basically what I do is it's the same sort of instruments as you would use for water dowsing. So you have the rods, and what you need to do is you just walk across looking for, you take the rods and they deflect when there are changes in the current in the earth. So this means that in order to find any of the ley lines, you need to walk a lot, and you need to go back and forth, look for changes, and also check. For example, you'll be using the rods and going along, looking for the line, and where the line is, when you cross the line, the rods themselves will actually cross. They'll move, and so this means that in order to find the position where they move, that's where the line is situated. You need to look. The other way is when you're using a pencil, so in the same changes, and also check them, because sometimes you'll get changes that maybe aren't.
One possible explanation is that the ghost is always present but can only be seen under certain conditions. The time of year, the weather, the flow of energy all must be just right before a motorist can glimpse a few frames from these continuously looped projections. One possible explanation is that the ghost is always present but can only be seen under certain conditions. The time of year, the weather, the flow of energy, all must be just right before a motorist can glimpse a few frames from these continuously looped projections. One possible explanation is that the ghost is always present but can only be seen under certain conditions. The time of year, the weather, the flow of energy, all must be just right before a motorist can glimpse a few frames from these continuously looped projections. One possible explanation is that the ghost is always present
Nearby Inch Farm had noise rented car impacts woman instantly, third died hospital. Memorial was held at Church of the Blessed Virgin Burham. My seat was turning red. 238 first ghost sightings, motorist alone night would hitchhike bottom hill. She would ask for a lift. Rochester and his back. Week Street. Find disappeared. Okay. Now for the news in full.
1, 2, 3. The whole of Bluebell Hill is heavily charged, with a particularly strong line of force running between Upper and Lower Kitts County. From these two sites, lines radiate outwards to Burnham Court in the west and Denton in the east. The charge, which is like some form of magnetic or electrical field, travels in straight lines across country, but at the circumference of the stone circles it changes into a spiral, a rotating force that leaps from stone to stone, creating complex and intricate patterns. The standing stones and churches act like conductors, allowing the charge to dissipate naturally. At the point of intersection on the hill, it would appear that a blockage has occurred, and consequently a highly intensified field field happened.
About 48 hours. Where the body has been involved in high velocity impact and the surface of the skin is unbroken, an odd form of mummification takes place, with decomposition occurring at a very slow rate, if at all. One theory is that the sudden impact inverts the body's magnetic poles. If large bar magnets are applied to the poles, the polarity can be reversed and the composition take place at normal.
Local newspaper archives contain numerous reports of black magic and pagan ritual on Bluebell Hill. This activity is centered on the many Neolithic burial sites and standing stones in the area, in particular the Druid temples at Upper and Lower Kitts Coty. We obtained a 19th century ordnance survey map from the British Museum, and using glass-headed pins, marked the positions of the burial sites and of certain other features of the landscape, namely churches, ponds, springs, mounds, and tuba. It soon became clear that the sites lie along several straight lines, with three of the lines intersecting on the hill at the point of the carriage. It was
Hello, this is your dad speaking. I don't think I'll manage it tonight, but I do hope to be along at the weekend. And would you please not give my address to anybody, even to my closest friends? Just anybody who wants to know that I live in London, which is a fact. Hope to see you, and all the best. Hope people don't drink too much. Bye.
Hello, this is a message for camera work. Basically, I booked the darkroom for next week for Thursday, Friday and Saturday, and I'm afraid I have to cancel it. I also was supposed to come tomorrow for an induction at 12, but I cannot make it.
Why is it that when you want to talk?
Hello, I've just been to Camera Work to review it for my magazine, and came to see some auto-destructive art, and auto-destructive events. Well, that wasn't what I saw at all. If I wanted to see a shredding machine, I could have gone into my own office and seen that. And also, don't waste time saying it's a celebratory shredding of 21 years of history when all it is contains the chattering classes. Waste of time.
Itself indiscriminately. I don't think we should, although obviously we should talk to Jessica about it. I don't think we should be too public about saying that it's only the crap bits that we're shredding and we're keeping all the important bits. Part of the project should be that they think we're getting rid of everything, I think. Anyway, speak to you soon. Bye.
Clothing.
The charge, which is like some form of magnetic or electrical field, travels in straight lines across country, but at the circumference of the stone circles, it changes into a spiral, a rotating force that leaps from stone to stone, creating complex and intricate patterns. Standing stones and churches act like conductors, allowing the charge to dissipate naturally. At the point of intersection on the hill, it would appear that a blockage has occurred, and consequently a highly intensified field has built up. It may well be this that's providing the energy source for the psychic activity in the area.
Probably been touched on slightly before, but I'd like to just dwell on just a bit, and that is the question of the dehumanization in contemporary music that some people have been talking about. Yeah. And I mean it specifically of electronic music. Yeah. And you know, the two criticisms that have been made are both that the medium itself is dehumanized, like the sine wave and the others are very bare, sterile. They don't have, you know, the human eccentricities around them that we hear in a concert hall. The second criticism is perhaps a little more fundamental, and that has to do with the actual content You know, although you don't divorce it from the form, you call it the form. I mean, there is some sort of content, and presumably this is a reflection of some sort of social phenomenon. And the question is, in effect, if this phenomenon is so dehumanized itself, maybe the art is going to die fairly quickly.
In the case of the wall, 27 microphones connected to a control panel will be placed on the sloping concrete terrace directly in front of it.
Station 3. Station 3. Station 3. Station 3.
Station green. Station green. Silence. Station green. Silence. Station green. Station green. Station green.
Station 3. Station 3. Station 3. Station 3.
But then,
Bluebell Hill. It's known locally as the Turnlock, on account of its many twisting.
it was on one of these bends that one wet Friday night in 1965, 3 young women came to their deaths. The woman driving the car, whom we shall call C, was to have been married the following day, with her 2 passengers as bridesmaids. C had borrowed her brother's red Cortina so they could drive to the Admiral Motel to meet her fiancé. Between the junction for Lower Bell and the Hangway turning, where the incline's at its greatest, the foliage at its greenest, their car skidded and left the road before colliding with a copse of fir trees. A worker at the nearby Inch farm heard the noise and ran to the car, but the impact had killed 2 of the young women instantly, whilst the third died later in death. A memorial service was held at the Church of the Blessed Virgin God, where C was buried.
It wasn't until 2 or 3 years after the accident that the first gas sightings were made. Motorists travelling alone often at night pick up a woman hitchhiker on the bottom of the hill. She would ask for a lift into Rochester and insist on sitting in the back.
It was not until 2 or 3 years after the accident that the first ghost sightings were made. Motorists travelling alone often at night would pick up a woman hitchhiker on the bottom of the hill. She would ask for a lift into Rochester and insist on sitting in the back of the car, but then as they reached Week Street, the driver would turn round only to find